Hello and welcome to the Sacred Truth channel. Today I want to take you into a deep reflection. A reflection that can completely change the way you interpret pain, difficulties, and even the most confusing moments of your life. Because the question we're going to explore today is not simple. It's not comfortable, but it is extremely necessary. Why do God's chosen ones seem to suffer so much? Before we continue, I want to ask you something important. Subscribe to the channel now and turn on the notification bell, because what you're about to hear is not just content, it's understanding. And while you watch, I want you not only to listen, but to observe yourself. Because maybe without realizing it, this message is describing exactly what you're going through. There is a very common idea that if God chooses someone, that person should live an easier life, more protected, more stable, with fewer problems and more answers. But the reality is completely different. In fact, when you begin to observe the deepest stories, both in real life and in Scripture, you start to notice a pattern that many ignore. The greater the purpose, the greater the process. And that changes everything. Because suffering, from a human perspective, seems like a sign of abandonment. It feels like something is wrong, like God has stepped away, like you are on the wrong path. But from a divine perspective, suffering is often the exact opposite. It is a sign of construction, a sign of preparation, a sign that something is being formed within you that could not be formed any other way. And here is the first point you need to understand deeply. God does not choose ready-made people. He forms chosen people. And that formation does not happen in comfort. It happens in the process. And the process most of the time involves pain. Because think about it, everything that is strong, everything that is resistant, everything that lasts, goes through pressure. Gold is refined by fire. Diamonds are formed under extreme pressure. A solid structure needs a deep foundation. And in the same way, a person who carries purpose cannot be built on superficiality. And that is exactly why the chosen ones seem to suffer more. Not because God wants to see suffering, but because He is building something that requires depth. And depth is not developed in comfort. Now maybe you are starting to remember moments from your own life. Moments when you didn't understand what was happening. Situations that seemed unfair. Doors that closed without explanation. People who walked away for no clear reason. Seasons where you felt like you were doing everything right, and yet everything still seemed to go wrong. And the question that came to your mind was, why? Why me? Why like this? Why now? And maybe you never received a clear answer. But today I want to show you a different perspective. What if what you called delay was actually protection? What if what you interpreted as rejection was actually direction? What if what you felt as loss was actually pruning? Because there is something that very few people understand. God is not only interested in giving you something, He is interested in preparing you to sustain what He is going to give you. And that preparation requires removal. It requires adjustment. It requires transformation, and that hurts. It hurts because it breaks expectations. It hurts because it is out of your control. It hurts because most of the time you don't understand it while you are going through it. And the hardest part is that this process almost always happens in silence, without explanation, without warning, without immediate clarity, and that can make you feel lost. But here is a truth that changes everything. God's silence does not mean absence. It means invisible work. While you think nothing is happening, something is being shaped inside you. Your patience is being tested. Your faith is being strengthened. Your character is being aligned. Your dependence is being realigned. And this cannot be done superficially. Now let's go deeper. Because the suffering of the chosen is not only about external circumstances, it is also about internal transformation. And this is a part that few people want to accept. Because everyone wants the purpose, but few want the process that comes before it. Everyone wants the result, but few accept the preparation required. Because the truth is, God cannot entrust something great to someone who is not yet emotionally, spiritually, and mentally prepared to handle it. And here is a very important point. Many times suffering is not destroying you. It is revealing you. Revealing your weaknesses. Revealing your dependencies. Revealing your insecurities. Revealing everything that needs to be dealt with before you move to the next level. And that can be uncomfortable, because you begin to see things in yourself that were hidden before. You start to understand that not everything within you is aligned. You begin to realize that there are still areas that need growth. But this is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of development. Because no one evolves without confrontation. No one grows without being challenged. No one transforms without going through a process. And that is exactly what sets the chosen ones apart. They are not the ones who don't suffer. They are the ones who are shaped through suffering. And maybe right now something is starting to make sense inside you. Maybe you are realizing that your story is not random. That what you went through was not by chance. That there is a pattern, a direction, something being built. But there is still much more that needs to be understood. Because up to this point, we have talked about the process, but we have not yet talked about the purpose behind that process. And that changes everything. And the answer begins with something many people avoid accepting. The greater the purpose, the greater the level of preparation. God does not prepare chosen people in a superficial way. He does not build something strong on a weak foundation. And this means that many times what you are going through is not random. It is proportional to what is being formed inside you. Because you cannot carry something big with a small structure. You cannot sustain a high-level purpose with a limited mindset. And that is exactly why the process is intense. Think about it carefully. A person who has never been pressured will hardly develop resilience. A person who has never faced loss will hardly learn to value what truly matters. A person who has never been broken will hardly develop true humility. And God works exactly in these invisible areas, the ones no one sees but that sustain everything. And that is why the suffering of the chosen is not just about pain, it is about construction. But here comes something even deeper, something that completely changes how you see your struggles. Suffering is also a filter. Not everyone is willing to continue when it gets hard. Not everyone remains when there are no visible results. Not everyone can endure the silence, the waiting, the internal pressure. And that is exactly where separation happens. Not because God wants to exclude, but because the process naturally reveals who is truly willing to continue. Because it is easy to say you want a purpose. What is hard is accepting its cost. And many people give up not because they were not called, but because they were not prepared for the process that comes with that calling. And this explains why so few actually reach the end. It is not a lack of opportunity. It is a lack of endurance. Now there is a point that few understand, but it is extremely important. Suffering also develops discernment. When everything is easy, you don't question much. You don't analyze deeply. You don't feel the need to grow internally. But when you go through difficult moments, something changes. You begin to pay more attention. You start to notice patterns. You begin to understand people, situations, and decisions more clearly. You mature. And this maturity does not come through comfort. It comes through confrontation. Because suffering forces you out of the surface. It forces you to look within. It puts you face to face with your limitations, your weaknesses, your choices. And that, although painful, is extremely powerful. Because only those who have the courage to confront themselves truly grow. And chosen people go through this kind of growth, not because they are weaker, but because they are being prepared to see further. Now let's move into something even more sensitive. Something that may explain many things you've experienced. The suffering of the chosen often involves emotional loneliness, and this hurts in a different way. Because it's not just about going through difficulties. It's about feeling like very few people truly understand what you are experiencing. It's about trying to explain something you can't fully explain yourself. It's about realizing that your battles are internal, deep and often invisible to others. And this can create a sense of isolation. But here is the truth that changes everything. This loneliness is not abandonment, it is alignment. Because while you are surrounded by too many voices, too many opinions, too many influences, it becomes difficult to clearly hear the direction God is giving you. And it is in silence, often lonely silence, that this clarity begins to emerge. It is in this place that you learn to depend less on external validation and more on internal conviction. It is in this place that your faith stops being based on what others say and starts being based on what you live. And that is extremely powerful because it creates something that cannot be easily shaken: conviction. And without conviction, no one sustains purpose. But now we need to confront something that can completely change your perspective. Not all suffering comes from God, but all suffering can be used by God. And this is very important to understand, because there are pains that come from wrong choices, toxic environments, impulsive decisions. There are natural consequences of life. But God in His sovereignty can use even that as part of the process. He turns mistakes into lessons. He turns pain into maturity. He turns loss into direction. And that shows something powerful. Nothing is wasted. Nothing. If you are willing to learn, to grow, to adjust, even what seemed like a delay can become progress. And this completely changes how you see your past, because you stop seeing it only as loss and start seeing it as formation. Now here is a point that may be hard to accept, but it is essential. Suffering reveals the level of your faith. Not the faith you declare, but the faith you truly have. Because it is easy to trust when everything is fine. It is easy to believe when things are working. But when everything feels confusing, when nothing makes sense, when answers don't come, that is where real faith appears. And that is exactly where many give up. Because faith that has not been tested, has not been strengthened. And chosen people go through tests, not to prove something to God, but to develop something within themselves. And every time you decide to continue, even without understanding, something inside you becomes stronger. Every time you choose to trust even without seeing, your faith grows. Every time you remain even without feeling, your internal structure becomes more solid. And that builds something that cannot be easily shaken. But there is still something we need to understand. Something that connects all of this clearly. Suffering is not the destination, it is the path. It is not the end of the story. It is part of the process. And when you understand this, you stop asking only, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this forming in me? And that shift in question changes everything. Because it takes you out of the position of a victim and places you in the position of someone in formation. And people in formation don't give up easily. They learn. They adjust. They continue. And maybe now you are starting to see your own life differently. Maybe what you called suffering is starting to make more sense. Maybe what you saw as delay is starting to look like preparation. Maybe what you thought was abandonment is starting to feel like alignment. But there is still one last part. Because understanding suffering is important. But knowing what to do with it is what truly changes your life. Because in the end, it is not the pain that defines your destiny. It is how you respond to it. And here is the truth that changes everything. There are two ways to suffer. The first is to suffer and become hardened. The second is to suffer and be transformed. And that choice, even if it seems invisible, is made every day in every decision, in every reaction, in every thought you feed. Because suffering by itself does not improve anyone. It only reveals and intensifies what already exists within you. If there is bitterness, it grows. If there is fear, it expands. But if there is a willingness to grow, it transforms. And that is exactly what differentiates someone who just goes through difficulties from someone who is shaped by them. Chosen people are not those who avoid pain. They are those who learn to use pain as a tool. And that changes everything. Because instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" now you begin to ask, "What is this teaching me?" And that shift in perspective turns suffering from a burden into a process. But now comes an even deeper point. Perhaps the most important of all, suffering also requires positioning. It is not enough to understand. It is not enough to reflect. It is not enough to feel. There comes a moment when you need to decide who you are going to be within the process. You can keep reacting the way you always have, or you can start acting differently. You can keep being controlled by your emotions, or you can start developing mastery over them. You can keep waiting for everything around you to change, or you can start changing from within. And this decision is not made once. It is made every day, because real growth does not happen in a moment. It happens in consistency. Now, there is something you need to understand very clearly. God does not waste pain. Nothing you go through is in vain when you choose to grow from it. Every frustration, every rejection, every loss, every moment of silence, all of it can be used as raw material for something greater. But that depends on your response, because the same suffering that builds one person can destroy another. And the difference is not in the intensity of the pain, but in the posture toward it. And here is something that may confront you, but needs to be said. At some point, you need to stop just feeling and start acting, because there is a line between process and stagnation. There is a moment when you have understood enough, reflected enough, recognized patterns, and now you need to make different decisions. And that moment is decisive, because many people get stuck in the cycle of understanding, but not changing, feeling, but not acting, recognizing, but not transforming. And that prevents any real progress. But chosen people, even with fear, even with doubts, even without having all the answers, take steps, small steps sometimes, silent, almost invisible, but consistent. And that creates something extremely powerful, movement. And movement creates transformation. Now let's move to the final point, the one that defines everything, the purpose of suffering. Because after all of this, you need to understand that suffering is not just about you. It never was. What God builds in you is not only for you, it is to impact others. It is to strengthen others. It is to guide others. Because someone who has never been through anything can hardly truly help someone else. But someone who has been broken, shaped, and rebuilt carries something different. They carry authority. They carry sensitivity. They carry understanding. And that cannot be taught only with words. It must be lived. And maybe that is why the process is so intense, because the level of impact you can have depends on the level of transformation you are willing to go through. And that completely changes how you see everything, because you stop seeing suffering as something personal and start seeing it as preparation for something greater. But now we reach the most serious point of all. Because after all of this, it is no longer about understanding. It is about decision. You can hear all of this. You can relate. You can even feel like this explains your life, and still choose not to change. And that is the difference between someone who just receives a message and someone who transforms their own story. Because in the end, it is not suffering that defines who you become. It is the decision you make within it. And maybe right now, you are feeling something you cannot fully explain. Maybe a mix of clarity and confrontation. Maybe a realization that you cannot keep reacting the same way. Maybe an awareness that something needs to change. Not tomorrow, but now. And this moment is extremely important. Because there are moments in life that define directions. Moments when you need to choose between staying in the same pattern or starting to live differently. And this may be one of those moments. So now I want to ask you a question. A simple question, but one that can change everything. Will you continue to be defined by what you go through? Or will you start to be defined by what you decide? Because in the end, being chosen does not mean having an easy life. It means having a life with purpose, and purpose requires process. It requires growth. It requires transformation, but it also gives something that nothing else can offer: meaning. And when your life has meaning, even suffering begins to have value. And that changes everything. If this message spoke to you, comment down below. I will not give up. Subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear this. And stay on this journey, because in the end, it's not about how much you suffered. It's about who you decided to become.